Stephanopoulos starts right now.
Republican reckoning.
We've got to focus on reversing the decline of our country.
Right. 8 candidates face off.
I'm the only person on the stage who isn't bought and paid for.
Going back and forth, being childish is not helpful to the American people.
Tackling key issues and a political newcomer.
We don't need to bring in a rookie.
You have no foreign policy experience, and it shows.
And you know,
I've had enough of a guy who sounds like ChatGPT.
Hoping to shine in Donald Trump's absence.
I'm not going to support somebody who's been convicted of a serious felony.
I will bring out the best of America.
The frontrunner posing for a mugshot 24 hours later.
We did nothing wrong at all.
What will it mean for the 2024 race? All eyes were on Georgia this week, but we wanted to find out what the voters are thinking. Republican contender Christie and Biden campaign co-chair Cedric Richmond join us, plus our powerhouse roundtable. Deadly revenge.
That it's likely Prigozhin was killed.
2 months after leading a mutiny against the Kremlin, a plane carrying Putin's rival plunges to the ground. The latest this morning. And
I have a dream today.
Our Pierre Thomas reflects on the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington.
From ABC News, it's This Week. Here now, Martha Raddatz.
Joining us now is former governor of New Jersey and current Republican candidate for president, Christie. Good morning to you, Governor. I want you to rate your own performance on Wednesday night. Looking back on it now, is there anything you would have done differently? Jersey and current Republican candidate for president, Christie. Good morning to you, Governor. I want you to rate your own performance on Wednesday night. Looking back on it now, is there anything you would have done differently?
Not really, Martha. I mean, I think that, you know, I answered the questions as I always do, really directly, looked into the camera and spoke to the audience at home and told them the truth. And the truth is that, you know, we can't have a convicted felon as our nominee for president and expect we're going to win. And it was really the most amazing part of the debate to me was the idea that, you know, the majority of my competitors believe that you can have a convicted felon as our nominee for president and that they'd support that and that he could win. I think that's an impossibility. And I think what it'll mean for folks across the country is 4 more years of Joe Biden. And for Republican primary voters, they have to think about what that'll mean. Potentially a packed Supreme Court, potentially the elimination of the filibuster, and a lot more. So what's at stake here is we need to nominate someone who's proven that they can beat Democratic incumbents. And I was the only one on that stage that's ever done that, and I'll beat Joe Biden if I get the nomination.
On the felony and the possible felony conviction, I talked to a lot of voters down south this week and a lot of officials who just don't think it matters, that it just canceled out with Hunter Biden. They don't seem to care.
Well, look, Hunter Biden's not on the ballot. And you know that I predicted weeks before the Hunter Biden plea was rejected that it would be rejected because it was a completely one-sided plea deal in favor of Hunter Biden. Now he's going to face the same type of trial that Donald Trump's going to face. And here's the interesting part. You know, some of those voters who say that the Hunter Biden thing matters, but Donald Trump's doesn't. That's just wishful thinking. The fact is that the 2 people who would be on the ballot if we nominated Donald Trump will be Donald Trump and Joe Biden, not Hunter Biden. And the fact is, it's the conduct of the people who are running for office that's going to matter the most. We may find out more about President Biden in the months to come. But the fact is, right now, Donald Trump is out on bail in 4 different jurisdictions in this country.
Governor, I want to go.
That is not going to be the main thing. Then they don't understand the way politics works.
Well, you faced very loud boos in that room, and our poll of Republican debate watchers saw your favorability rating rise double digits, but also had you as the candidate who performed the worst. Your reaction?
I've seen other polls that said I performed as high as second or third on the debate that night. I don't think those instant polls really matter all that much. What matters and what's going to endure is, do people see someone up there telling the truth or not? Do you see it playing politics, or do you see it working for the American people and what they believe in? I stood up there and said very clearly that we need to be more aggressive in Ukraine. And when you see Vladimir Putin this week murdering Prigozhin, his political opponent and military opponent, you see the way Vladimir Putin does things. Now, if that's is that something that folks on the stage want to be associated with? They're going to be judged on that. I want to stand with the free people of Ukraine, because this is a fight against China. This is a proxy war against China. China is funding Russia, Martha, as you know, to prosecute this war. And we need to stand up against China in every corner of the world right now to send them a very clear message that, if they try to get aggressive themselves, the juice is not going to be worth the squeeze.
Governor, I know you want to
stage who are ambiguous.
I know you want to stick to the issues, and you talked about the issues a lot, and so did others, but you predicted Trump would be on the debate stage this week. He was not. He didn't seem to suffer from that. Do you have any reason to believe he'll show up for the next one, or any in the future?
I don't think he'll show up for the next one. I never thought he would show up for the next one. It's at the Reagan Library, and of course, Ronald Reagan being a honest, direct, successful conservative, Donald Trump would not want to get anywhere near the Reagan Library and suffer that comparison. But we'll see if he shows up for debate number 3 in Alabama. I think that one is much more likely that he'll show up. I certainly don't think he'll be showing up at the Reagan Library.
55% of debate watchers rated Vivek Ramaswamy's performance as excellent. What does that tell you? And he seemed to be more attacked than Ron DeSantis, who is the front runner right below Donald Trump. Why didn't you and others go after DeSantis and instead go after Ramaswamy?
Look, I think the idea of why don't we go after this one or go after that one, my job is to communicate my vision for the future of the country. And if there's something that someone says that I drastically object to, and I have the opportunity to do so, I'll do it, as you saw me do with Vivek on a number of occasions. Governor DeSantis's answers that night, while some of them I disagreed with, I didn't think it rose to the level of having to get in a back and forth with him in the first debate in August of 2023. Here's one thing two things actually I'm happy to predict for you, Martha. Number one is that whatever happens in debate number 1 will not be determinative of the Iowa caucus or the New Hampshire primary. And number 2 is, I heard you say earlier, if the election were held today, I guarantee you it will not be. And so we're going to have a lot of campaign to continue. We're now sitting firmly in second place in New Hampshire. That's where my focus is, because this is not a national primary. It's a state-by-state primary, as you know. And we're going to focus our efforts in New Hampshire and in South Carolina and attempt to win those primaries as we get to them in January and February of 2024.
Okay, thanks very much for joining us this morning, Governor.
Thanks for having me, Martha. I appreciate it.
Co-chair Cedric Richmond, good morning to you, Mr. Richmond. Do you think that debate really changed anything in the Republican primary, in the contest? Does it impact your strategy going ahead?
No, it doesn't. I think what we saw that night was a race to the extreme part of the Republican Party, a race to the MAGA base, and that's what we expected. And I think that's very out of touch with what a general election strategy could and should be, and with what most Americans want.
Is there any question in your mind that Trump will be the nominee?
I think that whether it's Trump or it's not Trump, it's going to be Trump's policies. It looks more and more like it'll be his demeanor, and it will be his extremism. And so that's what we saw on the stage. So whether it's former President Trump or not, I think that it will be everything that he has brought the Republican Party to.
As Trump's motorcade was pulling into the Fulton County jail, President Biden sent out a fundraising pitch saying, apropos of nothing, I think today's a great day to give to my campaign. That's not particularly subtle, but are Trump's legal problems going to be part of your campaign against him?
No. Those emails go out, you get 5 and 6 of them a day. So I wouldn't read much into that.
Even though it was the day of the Fulton County jail. Okay. Legal problems. I just asked Christie this, as you heard. I'm sure people I talk to just say, look, it's just like Hunter Biden. Obviously, those are very, very different cases. But these voters seem to think it just cancels it out.
Well, the president has said from the beginning that he wanted an independent Justice Department, and we have just that. So we're not going to comment. We're not going to focus on Donald Trump's legal problems. But what I will say about President Biden and Vice President Harris is that they have always focused on the American people. So they're going to continue to do their jobs of bringing down costs, raising wages, rebuilding the middle class from the bottom up and the middle out, creating 13 million jobs, 800,000 manufacturing jobs. That's what they're focused on. And that's what they should be focused on. And the campaign's going to focus on talking about their record of accomplishments, what's at stake, what Republicans are talking about, like cutting Social Security, cutting Medicare, invading Mexico, all of those things that you heard on debate stage, banning abortion nationwide. All of those things will be the focus of our campaign. And we will let the justice system take care of what the justice system should take care of.
Let's talk about the economy. You mentioned the economy and jobs. The debate started with a question on Bidenomics, they called it, with candidates ripping into the president's economic agenda. And polling suggests those attacks are in line with Americans' perception. How do you bridge what the White House thinks is happening and what you're trying to pitch with American voters who are being polled?
Well, first of all, Bidenomics is a value proposition that we're going to build the middle class from the bottom up and the middle out, not trickle down economics, because it never trickles down to the people who are working the hardest, need it the most. And so we will stay with that. But since you mentioned the polling, what we don't talk about is consumer confidence is the highest it's been in the last 2 years. 3/4 of Americans are satisfied with their financial well-being. Over 3/4 of Americans are satisfied or very satisfied with their current employment.
Let me stop you right there on the polls. I just want to go back to these polls that we mentioned. It was a recent Fox poll. Do you approve or disapprove of the way Joe Biden is handling the following issues? The economy, approve 37%, disapprove 61%. If people are saying that in polls, they're not happy. So how do you keep getting that message out?
Well, we have to keep telling them about what we're doing. But I think that how you ask the question you ask, you're going to get very different answers. But when you hear so many people say that they're satisfied with their income right now, that they're very satisfied with their job, we think that's very telling. When you throw the word just economy in a broad sense, you get a different response. But what we're going to do is continue to do what we've been doing, and that is to talk to people about the fact that we're creating jobs, bringing costs down, bringing manufacturing back to the United States from overseas. And that's what campaigns are for us to go out and tell the story of us meeting challenges, what we've accomplished, the challenges we still have to meet, and all of those things.
I just want to say they were very specific in this. Rate economic conditions today. 80% said they were poor or only fair, but we will move on. Biden's age, once again, an issue. They brought that up in the debate as well. How do you get through that when Biden's out, when President Biden is out on the campaign trail in particular, which can be very taxing?
Well, while they talk about age, we will talk about the things that Americans are talking about, and that's kitchen table issues. And we're going to continue to do all of the things that we said. So they'll talk about age, and we're going to talk about the fact that we brought insulin down to $35 a month so that our seniors don't have to choose between medicine and rent or utilities. While they continue to talk about age, we'll continue to talk about the fact that they're not talking about banning assault weapons, while they're banning books, but they're not protecting our children in schools. The fact that none of them raised their hand to talk about climate as a real issue when we see fires in Maui, we see hurricanes hitting California, we see the destruction of wildfires, but they're not talking about that. So those are the things we're going to focus on. We're going to focus on the issues at hand, and we'll talk about the fact that this president wants to protect women's reproductive freedom. We will talk about the fact that he put Ketanji Brown Jackson on the Supreme Court, and that labor, climate groups, and women's organizations are all have endorsed him already.
Okay, I'm gonna have to stop you there, but we appreciate your time, and we'll see you again. The world's most photographed people, but his picture at the Fulton County Jail in Atlanta this week will be remembered as perhaps his most famous. The first mugshot of an American president, a single frame that will define this era of American politics. All the more remarkable, it was just 24 hours prior that his closest Republican rival staged the first debate of this election season without Donald Trump, all making the case to lead this nation, although none appearing to dent the former president's commanding lead among their party's voters. The simple fact remains this: the primary debate may have had some interesting moments, some important conversations, but if the election were held today, there is no question it would be a rematch of 2020, President Biden versus President Trump. So can anything change in the coming months? We spent the week speaking with voters and officials in South Carolina and Georgia, starting in the Palmetto State, where the first in the South primary is just months away. It's the state that turned the tide for Joe Biden in the 2020 primary.
Thank you, South Carolina.
But delivered its general election votes to Donald Trump. 3 years later, the reliably red state remains firmly in the grasp of the former president, despite indictments, impeachments, and an insurrection. Maurice Washington, former Republican chair of Charleston County and former supporter of Barack Obama, is now behind Donald Trump. Is there anything that would turn you against Donald Trump?
There are probably many things that could. I just haven't seen any evidence of anything that will do so up to this particular point.
Trump is polling 34 points above his nearest rival statewide and far above the two South Carolinians in the race, Tim Scott and Nikki Haley, leaving many to believe a Trump-Biden redo is a near certainty.
I think it's going to be an unprecedented, historic, for reasons that are good, bad, and ugly next year.
Despite the strong showing, Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace, who criticized Trump for January 6th, sees her constituents looking for an alternative.
I think some people are disenchanted with things in the past.
Donald Trump.
Yeah, of course.
And on the leafy campus of the College of Charleston, politics professor Gibbs Knotts says she may be right.
I think Donald Trump is proven to be a pretty good primary candidate, but I think he's going to be a less good general election candidate. I think there are a lot of people in the Republican primary who are better positioned to win the general election in those swing states.
Democratic Congressman Jim Clyburn, who many credit with delivering South Carolina for Biden, is hopeful Trump won't be the nominee, but is concentrating his efforts on the general election. Can Joe Biden reinvigorate all the voters he had in 2020, who may be disappointed in some parts of his administration?
I think he can, and I think he will. It's not just Joe Biden that has to do this. We have got to do this. Black and white, young and old, rich and poor, male and female.
But few states will be as key to winning 2024 than neighboring Georgia, which helped send President Biden to the White House and Donald Trump to the Fulton County Jail this week. Georgia, of course, is where Donald Trump is in legal trouble. It's here where he asked the Secretary of State to find 11,000 or more votes. But Donald Trump could also be in political trouble here. Patricia Murphy, a political columnist for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, says that political trouble was evident long before 2020.
Large neighborhoods in suburban Atlanta where we used to see tons of Trump signs had nothing. And Joe Biden came into Georgia and just offered a quieter, more moderate solution, and Georgia voters have moved more moderate.
Biden's win in Georgia was fueled in part by a shift in suburban voters and growing minority populations in the metro Atlanta area. Voters Democrats will rely on heading to the ballot box. Cliff Albright, co-founder and executive director of Black Voters Matter, is confident Black voters will turn out once again for Biden. I was down here in 2020 and talking to Black voters. They were enthused to come out. Do you feel that this time? I know it's early, but do you feel that?
Honestly, I really do. And we believe that the closer that we get to 24, the more that people are going to be energized. But the truth is, we've been energized really ever since 2018 and 2020.
But with Democrats worried about Biden's age and Republicans making the most of it, Democratic support in Georgia is no guarantee.
I think Joe Biden is helping Donald Trump a little bit right now. Joe Biden is seen right now as a depreciating asset. As he continues to have stumbles on the campaign trail, literal and figurative, as Kamala Harris really fails to sort of ignite Georgia voters' imaginations, that's just a slightly weaker ticket than it used to be in 2020. At the same time, what has Donald Trump done to gain a single vote in Georgia?
But what about that debate? We joined a group of young Republicans from Cobb County that night, a watch party they called it, although not everyone was watching. Brittany Ellison was taking a harder look at new candidates. But in the end, for her, one thing is certain. Are you still considering Donald Trump?
If he is the Republican nominee, I will absolutely vote for him.
And a powerful scene. Thousands gathered to commemorate the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream to break the chains of discrimination, of racism. But just hours later in Jacksonville, Florida, police say a self-proclaimed white supremacist gunned down 2 men and 1 woman, all African Americans, in what is being described as a racially motivated, hate-filled crime. ABC's Alex Perche is there in Jacksonville. And Alex, the police say the gunman who took his own life after the shooting left a trail of racist rants.
That's right, Martha. Jacksonville, Florida, now the latest scene of violence and hate in America. Police say early Saturday afternoon, a gunman walked into this Dollar General in the predominantly black neighborhood of Newtown wearing a tactical vest and armed with an AR-15 style rifle and a handgun and opened fire, killing 2 black men and 1 black woman before turning the gun on himself. Officials say the gunman was motivated by a, quote, disgusting ideology of hate.
Plainly put, this shooting was racially motivated, and he hated black people.
The people in this community, they're hurting, and they have every right to. You know, this makes no sense. I am very, very angry right now. I'm emotional.
Law enforcement has not yet publicly identified the suspect, but officials say he lived with his parents in neighboring Clay County. And this morning, ABC News learning the alleged gunman may have also planned to target a nearby historically black university. An Edward Waters University security guard spotted him near the campus library, that guard engaging and forcing the alleged shooter to drive away. The mayor saying the suspect's writings made references to a mass shooting at a Jacksonville video game tournament that killed 2 and injured nearly a dozen exactly 5 years ago to the day. Now, the White House says that President Biden has been briefed. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has called this shooting a cowardly act. And Martha, the FBI is now investigating this as a hate crime.